Hmm. Okay, let's go ahead and do this thing. All right, everybody. So we are officially live on Facebook and Instagram. What is up besides chicken butts, my friends? Let's do this Astro-Babble. We have been doing this every single morning, thanks to the lovely, generous support of everybody who has been sending in their birth dates, places, and times to me. I have them all in a queue, and we grab 8 of those charts in chronological order and throw them up in my Astro software. And I talk to you about some basics of these charts. They're kind of like 7 to 9 minute mini readings and gives a little bit of value to those who follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and also gets a little bit of astrology knowledge for those of you who are interested in learning more about how to watch the stars. So good morning, Kay. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. I appreciate you following me. Let's crack open a fizzy water and get to it. So like I said, we've got 8 charts. And we're going to start with Racquel. Good morning, Racquel. So Racquel was born 12:44 p.m. in Nashville, Tennessee. She is Scorpio rising. She is part of the tribe. And we have also Pluto and Scorpio here at 4 degrees in the first house. So we have a doubly Scorpio energy. This is something that we've talked about at length because, again, it's something that's in my chart, but also Scorpio rising with Pluto on the ascendant is part of my makeup too. So we tend to go over those details a little bit more in depth because that's also who you tend to attract. So Pluto and Scorpio in the first house of self is very much an embodiment of that underworld energy. We have a lot of darkness in the chart, but darkness is not evil. Darkness is rest, is the ability to withdraw, is affinity for those things that other people would not like to touch or that they are scared of. So it's embracing a little bit of that kind of Hades Persephone archetype and allowing yourself to fully claim your identity as a child of the underworld. Racquel, that's part of the big Scorpio theme that we see with people who have that Pluto in the first house as well as Scorpio on the ascendant. However, who is ruling the chart? The chart ruler is a very important part of astrology, and that is the planet that rules the sign on the ascendant. For Racquel, that is going to be Mars, because Scorpio is the traditional ruler of Mars, and her Mars is in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. A lovely place as well, because Mars is in Capricorn. Mars being in Capricorn is the sign of its exaltation. Mars thrives in Capricorn. It is said to dull Mars's fire, give him a little bit more patience, allow some of that aggression to be tempered, and to really create sustainable energy over time is a good way to think about that Mars and Capricorn energy, which is conjoining Racquel's moon in Capricorn in that 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication as well. So there's a heavy identification with the themes of the 3rd house in Racquel's chart. Writing, teaching, communication, absolutely essential for Racquel, and interestingly enough, something that she's going to be making good money with because she's got the lord of her 3rd house, Saturn, in Sagittarius in the 2nd house of finance. So that's pretty good. We do have a little bit of an issue financially because we have Saturn and Uranus both in Sagittarius in the 2nd house of finance. Not really a great financial situation, but again, it's all based on work. It's all based on how much effort Racquel puts into it, because her writing, teaching, communication 3rd house, where her chart ruler is Mars, is also ruling her 6th house of work. And in fact, she's got this North Node in Aries in the 6th house, which I think is a lovely complement to that, where she's really learning how to be a hard worker. She's really learning how to not let external circumstances dictate her creativity, and to allow her to step up to the plate and just really bang it out, and to sit down at the desk, get the project done. It's tough, it's hard, it requires a lot of focus and energy, but she's got it if she just puts her mind to it. There's a lot of really good sustainable energy in the chart for that. But we do have Jupiter. So we have Jupiter in a precarious spot. And this is something that I'd like to talk a little bit to Racquel about. The idea that her 2nd house of finance has some trouble, but the ruler of her 2nd house of finance, Jupiter, is in Pisces, which is great, but is retrograde in the fifth house of creativity, children, sexuality, parents. When we see Jupiter in the fifth house, it's normally really, really great because it's an expanded sense of creativity, especially with Jupiter being in Pisces, the sign that it naturally rules. Absolutely excellent. But Jupiter is retrograde, going backwards. There is a backwards energy to that creativity, parenting, children house. And because that is ruling the second house of finance with that Uranus energy there, I think that some of Racquel's creative endeavors might actually drain her finances, as well as the idea of children and parents potentially draining financial wellness from her as well. But again, it all goes back to the theme of the ruler of the chart ruling her sixth house of work and career. When we look at Racquel's chart, we have to understand that she can always work herself out of a problem, is a good way to say it. And that's not something that I really say to a lot of clients, because a lot of clients have to understand that there's a difference between what they're supposed to be working on in this life and their day job. In this case, Racquel's life is predicated on her day job, what she does for a living. Work is so entwined with her chart, it's ridiculous, especially with that MC at 21, the sun at 23, up in Leo in the 10th, as well as Mercury up in Leo in the 10th. Lots of fame when it comes to writing. Absolutely excellent. But we have this idea of the North Node making a trine to both of those structures, the MC and the Sun. Lots of good stuff. But it's not something that we'll be able to access per se, unless Racquel's on point with just the amount of hard work that she's able to get done in a day. I think that some people derive emotional satisfaction from, let's say, like spending time at home, or some people derive that emotional satisfaction from like a spouse or from friends or working on themselves. And really what Racquel's chart is saying is that she finds the most sanctity in her life through just showing up day by day and grinding it out and really making sure that she's working towards all of this promise in her 10th house of career with her Sun in Leo, her MC in Leo, her Mercury in Leo. Really, really good stuff. Powerful placements. There's beauty in her chart, but it's hidden away. We've got Venus in Libra, which is its proper placement, but we've also got the South Node, both in that 12th house of hidden enemies. Where's Taurus in the chart? Oh, that's really lovely though, Racquel. I think one of the ways that you'll actually be able to see your beauty and have access to that magnificent Venus in Libra is actually through your relationships, and others being able to show you or allow you to access that Venus in Libra. Your inner beauty really comes when you're in the presence of somebody who cares for you deeply, like a spouse, like a partner. That's really one of the only ways that you can access that piece of yourself, which tends to be hidden, which I think is maybe one of the reasons why you work so hard, is because you feel like you're excavating, you feel like you're digging at that 12th house, trying to cough up some of that beauty, which you can't really see. It definitely comes out in your writing. It definitely comes out in your teaching, your communication, your words. But when it comes to you being able to see you as beautiful, that's something that we can only really access through a spousal connection or a long-term relationship. Okay, good stuff. Thanks, Racquel, for sending in your chart. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Ludmilla, Albert, everybody jumping on to look around and check out the Astro-Babble. We're going through 8 charts. If you'd like to submit your chart, feel free to send in your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I need that exact birth time to me via private message, and we will get you in the queue. As well as if you would like to schedule a private consult or check out some classes, just visit my website at scorpiorisingastrology.com. Okay, let's go to English Roberts. Let's talk about that birth time at 10:15 p.m. in Owensboro. Oh, well, that's fun. So we've got the Ascendant in Virgo, and then we've got Pluto, South Node, Mercury. Mercury is also retrograde in Scorpio in the 3rd house. And then we also have the fourth house, a stellium of Saturn, Venus, Sun, and Uranus, all in Sagittarius in the fourth house of family. While Mars, who rules the third house of Scorpio, is in Libra, the sign of its detriment, and the moon is in Libra in the second house. That's a lot. It's a lot of stuff you've packed into the second, third, and fourth houses. So when we look at this chart specifically, we have the ruler of the chart in Scorpio, which is not a place that Mercury really likes to be. It's not in fall or detriment per se, but Mercury in Scorpio is a very deep, a very hidden aspect, a very spy-like energy for Mercury to be in, and Mercury is retrograde. When the Lord of the chart is moving backwards, we find a little bit of personality discrepancy and the inability to relate to people, or people just thinking that you're weird in general, which, I mean, having Mercury in Scorpio, period, as the ruler of your chart is going to make you seem weird to others right off the bat, because they're not going to understand how to process that really sharp intellect, that very fierce, penetrating gaze that Mercury in Scorpio really embodies as the lord of your chart. However, Mercury is retrograde, so whenever that planet is going backwards in a chart, especially when it's the ruler of the chart, there's this retrograde energy to the personality where people are like, why are you talking that way? Why are you moving backwards? Like you're out of step is a good way to say it. But still, we have a lord in the third house. So the lord of the chart being in that third house of writing, teaching, communication, big part of this chart. And we have the south node here, which brings us to an interesting dynamic about the chart that I think needs to be covered. Is we have the lord of the chart in the third present with the south node. So the personality is a little bit too attached to what was. To skills that have already been mastered, to things that don't necessarily need to be focused on that much. You've hashed out so much of this Scorpio third house energy in your life. It's time to evolve. It's time to make that next step. And the way that we evolve is by activating your ninth house node, your north node in Taurus up in the ninth, being ruled by Venus in Sag in the fourth house of family. So taking all of that writing, teaching, communication, and moving it to a higher level, moving it from, especially when I see third house, ninth house stuff, it's about taking that thinking small mentality of, oh, I'm just going to teach a little bit, I'm just going to write a little bit, I'm just going to speak a little bit, I'm just going to work locally, and actually working into that ninth house of travel, going abroad, higher education, like college level, and foreigners as well, working with people who are a little bit more difficult and not necessarily as comfortable for your innate personality style, kind of breaking through that comfort zone and really catapulting yourself into those ninth house qualities of travel, foreigners, and higher education. That's really the more important part of your chart dynamic. But we do have that north node ruled by Venus and Sag, which brings us into our stellium in the fourth house of family. There's a lot happening in the family dynamic. Not all of it is pleasant either. We have Venus in the fourth, which is good. Venus does not combust the sun. It is pretty close. But that sun in Sagittarius in the fourth, Uranus and Saturn here in the fourth as well, gives us a lot of mutable chaos in the chart, especially when it comes to family and the home life. I think that this is something that is equal parts inspiring and equal parts damaging, because we have, this Uranian energy that's really all over the place, this solar energy that's very proud and strong, this Venusian energy, which is really beautiful. But then we also have Saturn here, which tends to be very restrictive, tends to be very withholding, tends to be very punishing is a good way to say it. And all in that sign of Sagittarius, which is the mark of the idealist, that family life, which is potentially a little bit too white picket fencey. People in the family will probably ignore the problems that your Mercury in Scorpio retrograde is meant to sniff out. And I think that this is something that you personally will have had to get a grip on throughout the life, especially the early life, is you're just cut from a different cloth than the family is, and you see things in a different way, and you feel things in a different way, often a very intuitive way, often a very deep and penetrating way. Whereas that Sagittarius is that mutable fire energy that just wants to play and have fun and go all over the place, and you're subsequently punished because you're not going along with that family dynamic. And that's a little bit of a hard lesson for somebody to learn, especially when they already feel that backwards energy of the Mercury retrograde ruling the chart. We do have that. Oh, we do have a mutual reception there. That's fun. So we have Saturn in Sagittarius, but we also have Jupiter in Aquarius. Jupiter in Aquarius, Saturn sign, and Saturn in Sagittarius, Jupiter sign. That is what we know as a mutual reception. The planets are trading each other signs with each other, bringing a really good connection between those two planets. And also linking those two houses. So we have the 4th house of family and home. We have the 6th house of work, health, and pets, and they are together. So we have this process in the chart of this person really working in the family business, working from home, but also following in the footsteps of those who came before her, and that's part of the unique nature of that mutual reception between the 4th of family and 6th of work. Let's see what else. We've got this moon in Libra in the 2nd, which I think would be great, except for the fact that Mars is also in Libra here, and that's not necessarily great. Mars is in its fall in Libra, does not like to be in Libra. Mars would much prefer to be in the opposing sign of Aries, or in its rulership, its exaltation in Capricorn, or in Scorpio, one sign over. But alas, it is not. Mars is in Libra, taking that martial drive and separating it into possibilities as opposed to a single pointed focus. Not ideal for the chart, especially in the financial house. We have a little bit too. We have an idea of money that is a little bit too scattered. We have an idea of emotions that are a little bit too peacekeeping, that are potentially to detriment, and especially paired with that Mercury retrograde. We need to be aware that the emotional state cannot handle all of the options that are given from a financial perspective. So this is one of the charts that I would see and recommends that a CPA get involved, even if finances are a passion. Excuse me. I have a sneeze that's coming on. Even if finances are a passion, there is something to be said about there's something to be said about somebody else taking over the wheel in that department, because we do have a malefic Mars in the 2nd house of finance, but also that Mars in Libra, which is not in a great place either, which makes Mars relatively angry and volatile. So that's just another part of the chart. But I think if, again, the crux of this chart is really taking that 3rd house energy and transmuting it into the 9th, taking that local writing, teaching, communication space, and then bringing it up into that 9th house of travel, foreigners, and higher education. That's where we go from me here for sure. Okie dokie. Thank you, Jackie, Tundi, Melina, Christine, Sheila, Jennifer, everybody. Thank you so much for jumping on. We're going through charts. We have a lot more to go, so stay tuned. Let's go ahead and look at Donna's chart. So Donna was born 1:31 a.m. in Racquel. Let's take a peek, shall we? Oh, that's fun, Donna. I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, so we've got a Leo ascendant, which just brings all of that Leo glam into the personality. And it's not just a Leo ascendant, but it's a Leo ascendant with the sun ruling the ascendant up in the 10th house of career and fame and success. So we've got a very big personality as well, because Jupiter is in Leo in that 1st house of self. Absolutely magnificent to see a Jupiter in Leo in the 1st, but we have some issues there too. because Neptune and Scorpio is making a pretty strong square to that. Yeah, I think there are markers for just really big things in Donna's chart, because we have the sun up in the 10th in Taurus. Woo. There it was, the sneeze. Okay. Too much incense this morning. I think I have 3 sticks going, but my fan's pumping right on top of me, getting all that incense in my face. Too spiritual this morning. Tried to be too spiritual. Okay. So we've got this lovely ascendant. Oh goodness, and here's my lawn, people. Apologies, everybody. Let me stick in my headphones. I think that'll work. We shall see. Sorry for those of you on Instagram. I can't blow that out. But when we look at Donna's chart specifically, there's a really interesting dynamic between the 1st and the 10th house. First house is all about self, and we see a very strong sense of self because the sun is ruling the house and Jupiter is here in Leo in the 1st. Jupiter is our most positive planet of the planetary scheme. So we've got a lot of abundance, we've got a lot of creativity, we've got a lot of just self-awareness in general. And with the sun up in the 10th is that place of fame, it's that place of career, it's that place of being seen, it's that place of showing what you have to the world. And because we have that ruler in the 10th, and it being the sun is also in Taurus, just a really sustainable, beautiful sign, being ruled by, oh gosh, just so much goodness in the chart for Donna. We've got Mercury as well up in Taurus, Mars in Taurus. There's a lot of intellect. There's a lot of passion and fire, but that passion is tempered. There's a hard side to Donna with all of this Taurus energy that really helps to keep her grounded and practical. And I think that's definitely what's needed in the chart, because we have this Jupiter in Leo in the 1st house, which would make the personality very, very big, somewhat flamboyant, and out of control. Which maybe in earlier years was a little bit of an issue, but we have this Mars in Taurus that's squaring Jupiter, and then we also have a more toxic placement of the Neptune Scorpio retrograde in the 4th. So we have personality checks and balances, and I think part of it is being a little bit more detail oriented, being a little bit more grounded, being a little bit more picky, stubborn. All of those things actually help to keep the personality in check and under control, so that Donna doesn't kind of go off the hinges with all of this beautiful but very egoic energy that's in her chart via her Leo placements. I think we do need to talk about a little bit of the hard stuff. We do need to talk about family dynamics being a little bit toxic. We do need to talk about Neptune in Scorpio in the 4th. So whenever we see Neptune in Scorpio, it naturally represents chemical sensitivity, but that chemical sensitivity being in the 4th house of family, I see that a lot with addiction issues, potential toxicity in the home. Like, it could be as benign as somebody with severe allergies, food allergies specifically, or it could be as dark as somebody having addiction issues in the home that we would need to work out, because that energy, past, present, and future, needs to be transmuted into a higher vibration of that Neptune spirituality, as opposed to being kept locally in that 4th house of family and allowed to ferment and allowed to get a little bit too toxic. We do have Mars ruling the 9th house, so I think that one of the things that Donna will be relatively famous for is her teaching ability, also her ability to travel and interact with foreigners. We have a lot of good chemistry between the 9th house and the 10th house. That's always lovely, especially with Venus in Aries and Mars in Taurus making a mutual reception. We've got a lot of beauty in the 9th house. We've got a lot of just really a good combination of fire and earth in the chart for sure. And that's all really, really grounding to the baseline personality. Charisma is a good way to say all of this stuff. We've got a moon in Gemini too that's known for its ability to play to emotional extremes. We've got Mars, Mercury, Sun up in the 10th of success. We've got Venus and Saturn creating a grounded but action-oriented, because they're all in Aries, seek to pursue travel, foreigners, higher education, as well as Venus and Aries ruling that third house of writing, teaching, communication. Definitely being an instructor is something that's present within Donna's chart. But I think the big personal crisis is going to be making sure that the Leo Jupiter aspect stays under control. And I think that both the family circumstances and the picky, stubborn energy of that Mars and Taurus in the 10th really does ground some of that flamboyant energy, because she does have this ability with that Jupiter. Jupiter just makes things big. Whatever it touches in the chart, wherever it's located in the chart, it makes that energy absolutely massive. And Leo is that planet of flamboyance, is that planet of drama. It's that planet of, I like to be seen and to show you how good I actually am. Whether or not that's tied to self-esteem and self-worth is another story, but it's that showboating quality with that Jupiter in Leo in the first. And we've got countermeasures in place, but it's difficult for Donna, because there are people who will say, you really shouldn't be so hard on yourself. And Donna will snap back with, because that Mars and Taurus loves to snap back very, very quickly, very, very precisely, with this thought of, if I wasn't hard on myself, you wouldn't like who I am. And that's very true. I think that Jupiter and Leo can be very powerful. It can be very regal. It can be very influential. But whether or not that power is used to the ends that Donna has carved out in her chart is another story. Because if she allows herself to be overtaken by the fame that's in her chart, then it's not necessarily going to be productive for her life purpose, which is really to integrate the writing, teaching, travel, foreigners concept into her life plan, because it would be all about her and not about them. Yeah. So that's good stuff. Also, from a financial perspective, we have Mercury and Taurus ruling that second house of finance, but we have Jupiter, or we have Pluto as well as Uranus here, and both of them are pretty close together, within 5 degrees. They're both retrograde in the financial house. Money is going to be pretty difficult for the first 50 years of life. Just because money is, it's that thing that I see with the Pluto in Virgo generation, especially when it's put into the financial house. That phrase, money is the root of all evil, is stuck in Donna's chart. And unfortunately, it's not going to be until halfway through the life that she really starts to realize, hey, money is power, and power is not necessarily all good or all evil. Yes, it's true that power... absolute power corrupts absolutely, but that power can also be utilized in a constructive way. And I think that that's part of the makeup of Donna's chart in general, is she has a lot of power in the chart. She has a lot of presence. She has a lot of that Leo energy, but that Leo energy needs to be channeled. It needs to be harnessed. It needs to be given back to the greater good. It needs to be utilized for a higher purpose. And that's also something that we see with that Neptune and Scorpio, where she's witnessed people firsthand succumb to a lack of higher purpose. And so part of what she wants to make sure does not happen to her or anybody that she cares about is that they don't succumb to a negative influence of their own power. So that's kind of what I see in Donna's chart. Thank you everybody for jumping on this morning. We've got a couple more charts to go. We're not even halfway. I'm talking way too much. Okay, let's talk about Susan. Susan, my darling, my love. Susan was actually a client of mine and did not know her exact birth time. So we're playing with a secondary chart of Susan's. This is a technique called rectifying the chart, where I work with clients one-on-one in order to determine their accurate birth time based on life circumstance. So this is a little bit of an experiment with Susan's chart that she wanted to try out, because we've already had a session together, but she wanted to figure out whether or not the birth time was correct, with me doing just a quick reading on a different level chart, or a chart that's different because she had a Leo ascendant, but a couple minutes later, or earlier rather, and she would have had a Cancer ascendant. So we're going to read for her Cancer ascendant now. little bit of backstory, a little bit of Astro-Babble backstory. So in this chart, Susan, we have a Cancer ascendant, which puts the ruler of your chart as the moon in Capricorn in the seventh. And this is a identification with the ideal of a relationship. And this is something that we see in your chart with this new time as being probably one of your emotional priorities, is it being in that long-term relationship, allowing your heart to be soothed through somebody who has a Capricornian edge, who's very down to earth, very practical, somewhat withholding, but also very, very genuine in their bitterness is a good way to say it. That's a nice way to nice but not so nice way to describe Capricorn, and that's really where the Lord of your chart is placed. That's where the priority is placed in your chart, and I think that's something that really recharges you emotionally, is being in that long-term relationship. We do have the Sun as well as Pluto and Uranus in that third house of writing, teaching, communication. So another big part of Susan's personality is the teacher archetype, being able to radiate a sense of power, radiate a sense of kind of spontaneity with that Uranian energy, all in that house of writing, teaching, communication, going with her understanding how powerful words are and understanding how to use them effectively, but also to use them in a way that people don't expect to achieve results, is part of that makeup. We do have the Lord of the ninth house of teaching on a higher level, that higher education house of the ninth. In Pisces, we do have the Lord of that chart in the second house of finance. So making money, especially teaching at the the secondary learning level, is a big part of Susan's chart. But we do have, that's weird. We do have Venus and Leo here. Venus and Leo is retrograde right on the cusp of Leo at 29 degrees in the second house. So although money may be abundant from the teaching efforts, there is a little bit of backstory, as if paying royalties were a thing, as if money was being drained into different companies because of the effort. So the more successful financially you are, the more you feel you have to shelter money away in order to make sure that you don't financially go broke. And that's part of that Venus and Leo retrograde is, oh, look, here's all this stuff, but we're going to have to hide it. We're going to have to put it away. We don't have access to it. And that's a weird financial thing, especially when there's so much abundance in that second house of wealth, of resource. Nothing's necessarily bad from that perspective, but this idea of squirreling things away because there's no telling what might happen is a weird side effect of that Venus and Leo retrograde, that hoardy mentality. Let's see. We have some really spiritual children, and in fact, you're going to laugh, Susan. In fact, working with children in this chart is a big thing, because we have Neptune in Scorpio, which is direct in the fifth house, and then ruled by Mars in Sagittarius. Mars in Sagittarius is absolutely wonderful in the sixth house. It speaks towards a lot of creative fire. It speaks towards a lot of really good energy in the workspace, very hard worker, very driven. But that sixth house ruler of the fifth is going to talk about bringing parents and children into the workplace. So that's a really unique side effect of that rulership. But back to that fifth house of spiritual children, I think Neptune and Scorpio, when it's direct and to some degree when it's ruled by more beneficial placements that are a little bit more aggressive, like that Mars energy, it doesn't allow that Neptune to stagnate as much. So we have this spiritual side to all children in the home, as well as parents as well. A strong faith would be a good way to say it, but a faith that is also slightly hidden, slightly darker, slightly underworldy, maybe a little bit magic, very fairy realm-ish in that fifth house of family, children, creativity, sexuality, really good stuff. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Yeah, the North Node in Aries, as well as Saturn in Aries, retrograde up in the 10th house. There is this recognition that fame is where the chart is going, that success or being known for something over time is definitely where the chart is going. However, we do have issues with that. I would say self confidence and potential work ethic issues. Little bit conflicting there because we have this Saturn in Aries, which I think is a really constructive place to Saturn, for Saturn, even though it's technically in its detriment. That icy, cold, restrictive Saturn in Aries does give it a little bit of initiatory push and does make it really, really helpful. But it is retrograde in the 10th house. It is going backwards. And so that Mars in the 6th of work is ruling that 10th house of career. But there's a hesitation there. There's a, I know what I need to be doing. I am doing the thing, but I don't like doing the thing. And it's a catch-22 in Susan's chart, I think, when it comes to working, but working too hard and maybe working for the wrong reasons. There is a lot of passion, there is a lot of fire, but when it comes to getting well known, when it comes to career longevity, when it comes to putting roots down and being known for doing one thing, there's a terrible fight that gets waged in Susan's chart because then we need to talk about the money issues, and then we need to talk about more complicated things than just doing the work. And that's something that Susan really isn't prepared to battle, is that idea that the work itself will grow beyond her means and she won't be able to take care of it like her Cancer ascendant really wants to. So we need to work, but not too hard. We need to, get the work out there, but not too much that it becomes well known. We need to enjoy the financial resources, but we also need to squirrel away. There is this forward, backward, forward, backward, forward, backward energy in Susan's chart that I think is really fascinating with this new birth time. Okay, good stuff. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Yeah, we need to make sure times are accurate. So thank you, Donna. We might need to restick you in the queue for that. Birth times are very, 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 very important for this work. If you would like to get in the queue, I know Heal Stronger on Instagram wants to know. Let's go ahead and say again for all of you watching, you need to submit your birth date, place, and exact birth time to me via private message. Do not leave your private information in the comments for everybody to see on social media, but message me privately and we'll get you in the queue for these sessions. Okay, Timothy, let's talk about Tim. Tim was born 9:32 p.m. in Titusville. Oh, that's nice, Tim. I really like your chart so far, just at first glance. We have the Ascendant at 21 degrees Libra, and then we have the Moon in Libra in the first house, and we have the North Node in Libra in the first house. It's really all about you, Tim. I think that this is a glorious way for you to enter the world with that Libran energy that really just is about appreciating beauty, is really just about keeping the peace, is really just about keeping everything in balance. That very few people can unless they have really strong Libra placements. And because your Moon is here, your Ascendant is here, and your North Node is here, all in the first house, you're kind of born with all of those skills right off the bat to achieve that personal sense of satisfaction that you yourself have sought out to achieve. The issue here with that is we have the ruler of the chart, Venus, in Aries in the 7th. So let's talk for a minute, Tim, about all of this calm you would like in your life, all of this ease you would like in your life, all of this beauty that you would like in your life. However, you think that it has to come at the price of you being with somebody else. It's not just about you being worthy of good things. And that I think is a little bit wrong. So when it comes to your personal chart, one of the things that we need to understand is your relationships are not a predicate for happiness. You do not need to have somebody in your life and therefore you are happy, or therefore you are sustained, or therefore you have access to beauty, have access to the good stuff in life. That's not how it works. So we just need to be aware that you jumping from relationship to relationship, thinking that if I don't have somebody on my hip, I will not be happy. That's not the ideal. Yeah. So we need to work on some independent happiness as opposed to your happiness being contextual with a major relationship, because that ruler of your chart is in the seventh house, opposing your placements of self. So that's fun. Ooh. Oh, Tim. Oh, Tim. Okay. So we have an issue with your Mars and your Sun. So we have this. We have the Sun in Pisces as well as Mercury in Pisces. Womp womp. In the sixth house of work. So we have a very hardworking personality. Also a lot of sensitivity. You have a spiritual side, which is really really great. Everybody needs a good spiritual side, but it's squaring this Mars and Gemini up the ninth, and I think that this is a trap, Tim, that you've become aware of over time. It is, I think, almost in relation to what I just talked about with relationships being a predication towards happiness. You also don't need to constantly travel, see the world, have higher education, learning, or interact with people who you deem to be in a better spot, kind of like those visitors from the green side of the field where the grass is greener, that kind of thing, in order to be successful as a person. You just don't. A lot of people think that if I just take this next class, if I just learn this next skill, if I just develop this next routine, this next technique, if I just learn more, if I just travel more, if I just expose myself to the world a little bit more, then I'll be better as a person. That's a lie. And I think that that's something that you've kind of tricked yourself into believing, because you think, oh, well, it must be better over on the other side. And it's totally not, Tim. It's totally not. It may be in some instances, and it might blow you away for like 2 seconds. But then you realize that, oh man, it all comes down to being happy in the moment. It all comes down to appreciating the beauty that's in your own backyard and not necessarily letting other people, places, things dictate your internal state, Tim. Because you got it, you got the goods, you got some really strong placements in your chart. You have some really beautiful spiritual placements. You have some really lovely and nice and most importantly kind placements. But if you're constantly trying to escape, if you're constantly trying to travel the world and not appreciate your own backyard, then that's where things get a little bit tricksy. Okay. And in fact, I think all the higher education, travel, interaction with foreigners will drain your finances as well, because we've got Neptune and Scorpio retrograde in the second, being ruled by Mars up in the ninth. So those two houses don't really get along in your chart, Tim. We have some issues there, where again, all of these things that you want to pursue, they take money, they take resources, they take time and energy, things that you could use to actually. Again, the image of like building up your own backyard is a good way to think about it, as opposed to thinking that other people have the skills, other people have the talent, and I must go to them to acquire it, etc. Okay. We do have Saturn in Capricorn in the fourth house. It's a pretty rough family dynamic, Tim. We have a lot of stoicism. We have a lot of hardness in the fourth house of family. We have a lot of discipline. We have a lot of just hard knock life stuff, especially for the first 30 years of life. Saturn in Capricorn is known for giving tough love, and in that fourth house of family, it's not something that I really like to see, especially for somebody who has such beautiful placements on the moon and the ascendant with Libra and the sun in Pisces. There's a sensitivity to your chart, Tim. There's a grace to your chart that I think is really really powerful. However, your family certainly didn't appreciate it. And that's difficult when you have all of these internal gifts that people would kill for, but you're raised in a family where that is not the priority. And I think part of maybe what you need to understand about your chart is You're not wrong. You're not broken. You're not. You're certainly not lesser because of how you feel and the way that you think and the way that you view the world, despite what that family dynamic really impressed upon you. That's not. They weren't right either. So I think part of the striving that you have in your chart, Tim, is about you trying to escape that lack of love and trying to find that elsewhere, trying to travel, trying to learn, trying to find the reason why you were told that the way that you feel, the way that you think, the way that you operate is not of this world, and you're never going to find it because the people that raised you had just a very different mindset. That Saturn in Capricorn is very tough love, and it's because they were treated that way themselves. It's because that's the way that they were raised. It has nothing to do with you. Uh, in fact, it's your job to really overcome it in this lifetime and to nourish your personality, to nourish your sensitivity, and to really realize that core value of you are enough. So lots of good stuff with that. Always a good lesson to hear from an astrologer. So thank you everybody for jumping on. Hey Helen, hey Corey, hey everybody who's jumping on. I appreciate it. If you would like to send in your chart info, just private message me, and we will get you in the queue. We have 3 more charts and a little bit less than 15 minutes to do it. So we kind of need to skedaddle a little bit. So let's go ahead and pull up our next chart. Let's look at Terrell. So Terrell was born at 9:06 p.m. in Austin, Texas. Let's take a look at Terrell's chart. We have a Virgo ascendant, making Mercury the ruler of the chart. Oh, okay. We have some ego stuff here too, Terrell. We need to talk about. Ooh, 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 ooh. Validation station. Yeah. Ooh. Honey, I love your chart, but we really got to talk about it. So we have the ruler of the chart in the 6th house, which means that Terrell naturally identifies with work, health, pets. That's a big part of his makeup. However, we also have the sun here. 2 very personal markers in the 6th house of work tell us that Terrell is very focused on those aspects of work, health, pets. It's very much who this person is, and really, really makes them up soul side, as well as ego. But we have a little bit of a conflict here because Mercury, the lord of the chart, is combust. It's outside of that 1 degree range with the sun. So there is a little bit of the need to prove the ego over the self and developing a facade, developing oh, look at me, I'm so interesting. But that's not actually the case. The real case is more interesting. But this facade of the ego taking over the self is not necessarily constructive. Wouldn't surprise me if acting or drama was in the cards for Terrell, because the ability to change personalities is really, really strong. We have a mutual reception between Saturn in Gemini retrograde and the MC up in the 10th house of career success, as well as the Sun and Mercury in Aquarius down in the 6th house of work. So there's a good fame potential in the chart. However, again, there's this ego conflict where self-sabotage is part of the equation, where we have this really Saturnian I'm not good enough feeling that unfortunately pervades the chart. And we have the ego, which is trying to compensate in Terrell's chart by saying, hey, look at me, look at how interesting I am, look at how fascinating I am, look at all these Aquarian tendencies that I have, when the truest nature of the chart is really about being intellectual, being smart, being acutely aware of the world and its problems, and actually knowing how to solve a lot of them, as opposed to being superficial and aloof and mysterious, but from a quirky way. Like there's a little bit too much of the flamboyance factor that's taking over in Terrell's chart, which is really hiding or masking the essence of the truest intelligence that he really has access to. And I think that's a mistake. It's an easy thing because Aquarius and Gemini are very similar, but Gemini is much more flexible. Gemini is much more is much more interesting in my opinion. But Aquarius is what sparks people's interest. Gemini is charismatic, but we have that Saturn in Gemini up in the 10th. So it's really that practical Gemini where it's like, I have all of these options at my disposal and I can use any one of them in order to take you down at any given time. But Aquarius is a little bit more hands off. Aquarius is a little bit more approachable and non-threatening. But Terrell, a good part of your chart, is about being useful, about being threatening, about knowing what's in your Swiss Army knife and being able to utilize those skills appropriately, as opposed to you hiding behind some again, just the idea of a facade. Like that's not what your chart begs of you. Is a good way to think about it. Instead, I think it's really interesting. We have markers for children in the chart. We have lots of markers for children in the chart. Actually, that's hilarious. Yeah, so we have the moon in Capricorn, Jupiter in Capricorn, and Venus in Capricorn. Jupiter and Venus are conjunct at 25 degrees in the fifth house of children, which is just really, really awesome. Again, should you choose to have kids, Terrell, the ones that would come forward would be absolute gems. Like, to the degree where I don't even think you realize how beautiful a person can be until you witness your child. That's very much the energy that I see in your chart in that fifth house of family. And your North Node is here. Like, part of your life mission is actually to embrace especially the fame of your children. So the things that you weren't able to do, the things that you necessarily stopped yourself from doing, or again, played those games and you missed your opportunity, you have this chance to discipline, to shape, to mold your children in a way where their beauty is heightened, their beauty is seen by the world, and they don't fall into those same mistakes that you did in terms of yourself. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we hit the core of Terrell's chart for sure. That's really the big stuff. We got two more charts in the queue and 10 minutes to do them. Thank you, everybody. I'm getting all the messages now for birth dates, places, and times. I appreciate it. Let's continue. We've got two more charts that we need to take care of. Corey was born 12:12 p.m. in Surrey. We've got Mars in Pisces, North Node in Pisces, and the Ascendant all in Pisces in the first. Jupiter is the lord of the chart, up in the 9th at 0 degrees. Moon is also at 0 degrees. In Taurus, that's difficult. Okay, Corey, we got to talk a little bit. So we have Jupiter ruling the chart, which is naturally going to be really great. But then we have Jupiter in Scorpio up in the 9th, Neptune, Scorpio up in the 9th. The 9th house is that place of higher education, foreigners, travel. So there's a real identification with those topics in your life, in your chart, understanding how, especially because there's a mutual reception between Mars and Jupiter. Mars is in Pisces, Jupiter is in Scorpio. They're making lovely babies together. And connecting, again, this idea of you identifying as somebody who has the core tenets of higher education, travel, foreigners in you, and spirituality. I mean, you'd make a great astrologer for sure. But those aspects are very, very tattooed on your soul, is a great way to think about it. The moon, though, opposing in the 3rd house, as well as Saturn in Taurus retrograde in the 3rd house, we have this issue with playing small, Corey. This issue with playing small is preventing you from accessing the deeper resources that you have at your disposal. Whereas we had the previous chart, which was creating a facade. You're not creating a facade. You're literally saying, I can't do that. It's too big. Or I can't do that. It's just not me, when it actually is totally you. And that's a really difficult space, because you're supposed to be stepping into the spotlight, honey. You're supposed to be discovering who you are as a person. You're supposed to be delving into your sense of self. You're supposed to be awakening your spiritual gifts, and instead you're trying to hide them. You're trying to play them down. You're trying to make them small. You're trying to do anything but step up to the plate, and that's difficult because you have so much water in your chart and so much real intuition that it's just sad to see that that buffer put in place to such a degree where you're like, no, I'm a rational person, and I'm going to explain to myself how this does not make sense and how it's only possible for me to do these things. And you're standing in your own way when you do that, honey. You're just standing in your own way. And that's a difficult spot, I think, for you to be in, especially because you're supposed to be honing your gifts this time around as opposed to trying to suppress them. But that Mercury in Capricorn up in the 11th, like, you and your friends, you pride yourself on being so logical, so 10-step plan focused, so 20-30 years down the road vision boarding, and that's not where your ninth house really thrives. It's not where that learning, that foreign culture, that spiritual, that travel mindset really gets a chance to flourish, because a lot of those things are unknown and unexpected and glorious because they are. But if you keep trying to tell yourself to play it safe, I don't think that that's the move that needs to take place, especially because you've got Venus in Sag, Sun in Sag, and the MC in Sag, all in that 10th house of career success and fame, being ruled by your Jupiter in Scorpio. It wouldn't surprise me if you actually were able to use some of your psychic intuitive abilities to get relatively famous. But again, you're not going to know if you keep playing it small and keep trying to hide from your what are your natural talents. Water loves to hide. Water loves to not be seen. Water loves to just chill, just kind of be in a pool of its own making, and just kind of be wet and amorphous. But your chart is asking you specifically to tap into realms of your gifts, your perspective, your intuition that I think other parts of your chart are actively fighting, and that's not healthy. That's not what your chart, again, kind of demands of you this time around, because we've got a killer work ethic. We've got the potential for stardom in terms of what your natural talents are. But if you keep trying to convince yourself that you are less, that you will not be able to do it because XYZ, or that's not the life that you've planned out for yourself, it's just going to be a waste of time. So let's focus a little bit more on flying by the seat of your pants is a good way to do it, because if you try to control too much, if you try to let things bog you down, other people, yourself specifically, then it's just going to hamper your gifts. So we need a little bit more spontaneity. We need to channel that Sun in Sagittarius a little bit better, because that's how you access the beauty of Venus in your 10th house, and we really need to thrive on that. We also have Pluto in Virgo in your 7th house as well, making a square to that MC. So we also need to watch out with potential spouses not necessarily supporting your vision as well. That's going to be a tough bullet to bite, because it's just one other person in your life saying no, and you really don't need that. You need to have a couple years of yes, where again you're flying by the seat of your pants, and only during that time of unbridled ness, where you let control go out the window, will some of those watery intuitive skills feel free to surface. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We have one more chart to go through, and then we are done for the day. If you would like your chart featured, feel free to send in your birth date, place, and time via private message, and we will add you to the queue. And I promise to not light so much incense next time around. That was a mistake. Got me a little bit stuffy. But we have Joshua. Joshua was born 11:23 p.m. in Tampa. Let's take a look at Joshua's chart. Joshua's chart has Leo on the ascendant, making the lord of Joshua's chart the sun. The sun is in Scorpio, Mercury's in Scorpio, Pluto is in Scorpio in the fourth. Okay, Joshua, let me give it to you straight. The family dynamic is pretty rough. Um, we've got we've got a lot of we've got a lot of heaviness here. We've got a lot of toxicity here for the first 50 years of life. We've got an identity with the family, which in this case is kind of even worse, compounding those Scorpio tendencies. The I don't personally like to see this line up in the fourth house because it really talks to me about family being hidden, subversive, lying, cheating, being spy-like or espionage-like, constantly having to watch your back, and that's not something a sun ruling the chart likes to do at all. The sun wants to be radiant. The sun wants to shine. The sun wants to be Leo-esque, and unfortunately, you've put it in a very dark place in the chart and surrounded it with dark people, places, and things, and that's not an ideal that I would like to see. I think that especially with your Pisces moon, you have enough water in your chart already. You don't need to have been exposed to that. A good word would be tempate, which is a mark of evil is technically what it translates as, but that mark of darkness, that brush with the underworld. And I speak as somebody who has Scorpio rising, who has Pluto on the ascendant, and I'm all about thriving in the underworld. Trust me, I live and breathe the occult. However, in your chart to have that in the family dynamic, it can turn pretty toxic pretty quick. In this particular formation because it is squaring your ascendant and potentially backing onto your Pisces moon. I mean, killer intuitive abilities. If you survive that, you definitely have that in your lineage, your bloodline. But man, that's gonna leave some scars, honey. That we're gonna need to unpack some of that fourth stuff nonsense. Family, home relationships also being associated with this Mars and Aries wouldn't surprise me if there was military involved in the family, or the family was involved in higher education, travel, foreigners, having that fourth house of family and home linked to the ninth. Potentially moving a lot or traveling a lot with the family, and having that Mars and Aries kind of commanding, authoritative, slightly aggressive, and demanding presence as well, connected with the family. I really enjoy though this moon in Pisces, so close to the North Node in Pisces in the eighth house of death, taxes, estates, especially when it's paired with Jupiter in Libra. Jupiter in Libra is retrograde in the 11th house of friendships, but I think that one of the outlets of your chart is going to be using your intuitive abilities, specifically mediumship abilities. If you haven't discovered those yet, you're in for a real treat. But especially the friends that you develop will help to pull those things out of you, and you'll be uniquely equipped emotionally to handle a large amount of your friend's trauma, a large amount of death, a large amount of the sticky stuff that nobody really likes to handle, which you actually do very, very well, which is finance, estate work, taxes, things that naturally just make sense to you for some reason. I would say God-given reason for sure. Because that's part of your unique makeup, is being able to delve into the places that people don't feel comfortable with and being able to navigate those, despite it being also painful for you. Your empathy exceeds your fear of pain, is a good way to say it. And I think your friends really rely on you for that, because you have this Jupiter and Gemini in the 11th house of friendships, like you associate with a lot of good quality people, a lot of interesting people, who then also refer you back into the family dynamic. Everything ties back into family in your chart for some reason, which is really interesting, but also really weird. You can't really escape those lessons, Joshua. It's part of the work this time around, because of how you've asked yourself to behave in this life. Like you have so much value and advice to give to those people who really need to hear the dark side from a softer presence, is a good way to say it. And you're able to use, again, that that brush with darkness in a very constructive and compassionate way for other people to access, especially that Venus and Libra down in the third, with your writing, your teaching, your communication being so beautiful, and having so much artistry to it, and potentially being well known for writing, teaching, communication as well, because that Venus in Libra is ruling the 10th house of success. But the big work for you is really about keeping your head down, and doing the work, not just with the family stuff, but also with friends, and helping people unlock their deepest, darkest secrets that also involve the heavier topics of finance specifically, and death, estates. Somebody dies and you're able to talk to the loved one, but then also help them manage their estate and walk them through the grieving process, but also balance their books, and contact them with estate planning attorneys and things like that. It's second nature because of what you grew up around, is a good way to say it. So although you've been left with some pretty heavy baggage in the family department, stuff that you're really not even going to be able to fully understand or unpack until about halfway through the life, we have really solid skills that have emerged, a softness that is still very raw and lovely, I think, which people will be drawn to in order to help them through their stuff. And by doing that work and you keeping your head down, you'll simultaneously be working on your scars, as well. Good stuff. Okie dokie, everybody. Thank you for jumping on and watching the live stream. It already ended on Instagram, but if you would like to participate, feel free to send in your birth date, place, and exact birth time. We will continue to do the stream every morning at about 10:30. I'll message you when it's your turn. We have a really long queue, but I need that birth date, place, exact birth time, in order to run your chart and add you to the queue. If you would like to support me in any way, you can always send a tip to sam@scorpiorisingastrology.com via PayPal, buy an online class, or sign up for a private consult with me via my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. And yeah, we'll keep Astro-Babbling at your faces and talking about the stars. But in the meantime, may the stars be ever in your favor.